And good evening, everyone. This is Meathead, and I am using new toys, new software. I have found new and creative ways to torture myself. I'm using a new tool called Ecamm Live, which allows me to have a special guest on tonight. I have with me Max Good. Max works with AmazingRibs.com. He is extraordinary in the sense that he is the only man in the world whose full-time job is to test grills and smokers. Not a bad gig. In fact, I'd kind of like to have his job.
You do pretty good, Meathead.
Yeah. So I'm still fiddling with this software here, and where the heck is the which screen option so I can show you Max? Well, in any case, I'm going to try to work this out. Where is Max? I know he's out there somewhere.
I'm here.
Yeah, can you hear? Al, you were the first. Can you hear Max? Say hello, Max.
Hello, it's Max.
Can anybody see Max? Help me out here, folks. Give me some feedback. I'm not bad with software, but I'm struggling tonight. Well, give me just a second here to continue to futz with the software. Oh, there we go. Okay. Now, ha! I have found it. There's Max.
Hey.
Okay. Well, what I thought we'd do is we'd start off. It's spring. Hallelujah. How's everybody doing out there in coronavirus land? Are you guys nuts yet? Are you bored? Have you been cooking much? I thought what we'd do tonight is I usually start off with some sort of little rant and touch upon a subject of interest to me. And then we launch into questions and answers. So go ahead and post your questions. But I thought what I would do to start things off is I would introduce our special guest, Max Good, the grill tester, the smoker tester. I don't know how many Max has tested, probably more than 100. But Max maintains a database on AmazingRibs.com of maybe, I don't know, Max 200 items, 200 grills and smokers.
Oh, more like 600.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
600 different grills and smokers that Max has either firsthand tested or kicked the tires on at trade shows or in hardware stores, and it's really cool. There's this database on AmazingRibs.com that has, so you can go there and you could like search on pellet smokers or Kamados under $500 or over $1,000. It's an amazing resource, and this is a good time to be thinking about maybe replacing that old rust bucket of yours. It's important to state that we don't sell any grills. We don't have any kind of endorsements, sponsorships, no conflicts of interest. Nobody sponsors us. Max is completely independent. He has relationships, that he talks to these people until he gives them a poor score, and then they stop talking to him.
That has happened, yes.
And, it's happened recently, hasn't it? Anybody heard from Kevin lately?
Oh, well.
Let's not
get into that.
Let's not go there.
I love the man.
Yeah. But in any case, it's spring. It's a good time to replace the old rust bucket. All the hardware stores, big box stores have got the new grills and smokers out there. And there's a lot of different technologies, and there's some really cool advancements going on. And I thought what I'd do is turn it over to Max and let him tell you a little bit about what's happening in the world of grills and smokers. They're two separate worlds, but the streams do cross. And get you up to speed on what kind of cool technology is developing and what's happening, and then maybe you can ask questions of Max if you're interested in learning more about a grill or a smoker that you might be shopping for. And I'm here to answer your questions on cooking and grilling and smoking. So Max, why don't you, what the heck is going on out there?
Oh boy, well, some things don't change. The gas grills, the charcoal grills, there's always new models and new tweaks. I couldn't say there's anything earth-shakingly new in that realm. More people are getting interested in smokers, and particularly pellet smokers. There was a lot of growth in the Kamados for many years, but I think that's being eclipsed now. Traeger has done a fantastic marketing job over the last couple of years of informing people of what pellet smokers are, how they work, and why they are wonderful. You and I have been evangelizing them for years, and I've happily watched the popularity increase, and now it's just through the roof, and everybody and their brothers coming out with pellet smokers. One of these days I'm going to wake up and they're going to be camped out in my front yard. I think some company's going, Max, come on, you got to test this new pellet smoker I got. Traditional smokers, of course, are still there. The verticals, the charcoal, gas, and electric. One that's caught everybody's eye at Amazing Ribs and elsewhere, and in our Pitmaster Club, by the way, is Masterbuilt's new gravity feed charcoal smoker, which is thermostatically controlled, which means you can set it and forget it just like you do your kitchen oven. It's like a kitchen oven, only it runs on charcoal. So in that sense, it works a great deal like a modern pellet smoker. It's a thermostatically controlled outdoor oven with smoke. You just set the temperature. For those who still don't know how these things work, you just set the temperature like you would on your kitchen oven, and that's it. As long as it has fuel, it's going to run. And the exciting thing about that is, first of all, it's the only one I know of. There are gravity feed charcoal smokers that have been around a while. They're very popular, and I like them. But I haven't seen anything thermostatically controlled like this. It's basically, it's pretty much like a pellet smoker that runs on charcoal. But most pellet smokers can't get real hot. They're not really good grills. They're not good at sizzling at high temperatures. There are a few exceptions we could talk about. But this thing gets dang hot. It can go down low and slow like a charcoal smoker. It can also go rip-roaring hot like a kettle, with red hot charcoal sizzling away on it. So that's a pretty cool one.
Max, we've got a question from Albert Haller, which is a question that I think probably other people. You call it gravity feed charcoal. How does it not burn all the charcoal in the hopper? Let's describe physically what this device looks like and how the charcoal stacks in the hopper, how this gravity feed system. And by the way, we just got done telling everybody that we've got this database of 600 ratings and reviews. This device is so new. The review is still not published on our site yet. We're just finishing it up. And Husky, who runs our Pitmaster Club, is the guy who's testing it for Max and helping him with the review. And it probably will be published in the next week. But it is the coolest new thing on wheels. And so we wanted to talk about it tonight. Max, tell us about how this thing looks and works, because it is pretty clever innovation. Oh, and while I'm interrupting you, let me just point out, we're talking about trends. This is a trend that Max and I have been begging for years, and that is thermostat control. You have a thermostat on your oven indoors. You set the dial for 225, and it goes up to, it actually never really hit, well, it hits 225, but it goes up to maybe 230, goes down to 215, up to 230, and it goes up and down in what is, what's called a sinusoidal curve. It's two sinuses, up and down, so it averages whatever temperature you set it for. Your grills, they just have never done this automatically until pellet smokers came along, which are digital control, and you can set them, and many of them actually have a much tighter sinusoidal curve than your indoor oven. They're very precise. You have to keep the probe clean, otherwise it gets covered in carbon and your readings go off. But there have been a spate of new thermostat controllers for charcoal, where they measure the temperature in the cooking area, and if it's too hot, they turn off the oxygen supply or the intake, and when it gets cool, they open up the intake and let more oxygen in. This one goes into a further step, and that's with the charcoal control. Max, you take it from here. I'm stumbling on myself.
Well, the thermostatic temperature controllers Meathead talks about have been around a long time, and they're effective and popular, but they're an add-on. And sometimes you actually have to drill into the body of your grill or smoker in order to utilize them. This new master build gravity feed charcoal smoker, it's there. You don't have to do anything. Just put it together and start using it. To answer the question about what is a gravity feed design, they're pretty much vertical cabinets, which is that the smoke box area is like you've seen. Most people have seen the electric and gas ones. They're like a little closet. They're like a little locker from high school, and they have a door on the front. You open it up, and there's racks that slide out, and then there's a gas or electric burner at the bottom. Or in the case of most charcoal smokers of that nature, they'll have a rack where the charcoal goes at the bottom. But the gravity feeds have a charcoal hopper off to the side that has a firebox at the bottom of it. And that's an interesting question that was posed, that how does that not just burn all the way up through the hopper? And I couldn't give you a precise answer on that, but I tend to think that some of it has to do with just the fact that charcoal takes a little while to ignite. So it's as it burns down and becomes embers and ash, it's just in time for the fresh coals behind it to start igniting. I'm sure there are times, especially if the air doesn't draft properly and you get some kind of backflow in air. I'm not sure that could happen, but if there might be some instances where it would burn up the hopper, but I haven't heard. I don't think I've ever heard of that, although I'd be surprised if it never happened. We've heard of that happening more with pellet smokers, where they burn up into the pellet hopper, although that is even rare. But the exciting thing about this one is that there is no guesswork. You just set that temperature, as I said a moment ago, and moreover, charcoal smokers, in fact, any of those cabinet smokers, electric or gas, they're really not meant to be grills, but this one is. This one, you can crank it up and get it blistering hot and sear your brains out if that's what you want. Or you keep it down at 225 and let it go all night. It's Wi-Fi enabled, which means they have an app. You could go to bed at night with a bunch of pork butts on it and wake up in the middle of the night, go, oh, I hope everything's okay. Take a look at your cell phone, and it'll tell you, oh, I'm holding temperature. I got a meat probe in my meat, coming along just great. Back to Betty Bye time for me, Or if there is a problem, you can jump up and run down there and fix it.
I gotta jump in here for a second, because I think as long as we're talking about trends, this Wi-Fi control, smartphone connection, is quite common. No, I can't say common. It's becoming common, particularly on the pellet smokers, now on this gravity feed charcoal. But I think basically what's happening is the grill manufacturers are saying, hey, for years Americans have been cooking indoors on an oven, and it has a thermostat. How the heck would you ever cook indoors without a thermostat? Why are we making them cook outdoors without a thermostat? And I've seen a couple of comments. I'm watching the comments go by, and I'm not going to call any names Jean, but the whole idea is to make good food. And, we shouldn't make people pass a test or, struggle and burn 6 dinners before they finally become a pitmaster. What is really exciting about this is that people are, the equipment is getting to the point where people can go out and with very little expertise, very little knowledge, cook a gorgeous smoked or grilled dinner without having to be experts. And that's cool. I mean, if there's anything good coming from the coronavirus, anything at all coming from the coronavirus, more and more people are cooking. The restaurants are closed. They're stuck at home. And our website traffic is through the roof. All cooking website traffic. I was talking with Christopher Kimball the other day at Milk Street. His website traffic is up over 100%. Everybody is out there searching for recipes, cooking videos, technique. And so when this is over, and it will be over, we're likely to have a society of people who've really learned a lot more about food and cooking. And you learn by practice. I think the first revolution in American cooking came with the Food Network. I remember when it debuted. When you talked about bell peppers, they were all green. Now you can get green, yellow, orange. Look at all the hot peppers you can get. I mean, your grocery store, produce department, meat department, overflowing. Whoever heard of rib cap or beef back ribs or beef short ribs? All this is a revolution as a result of cooking on television. Well, I think what's happening now is the second revolution. And when we come out of this, we're going to have a lot of experienced people, and the technology is marching right along with us. We're going to have the smartphone, so you can put the brisket on at midnight, go to bed, as Max says, wake up in the morning, get up, go to work, and come home. While you're at work, monitor the temperature, and if it's moving too slowly, kick it up a notch, and come home and have a spectacular brisket for dinner. So this is pretty exciting stuff, I think.
I agree, yes. And, to those who would say, oh, that's not real barbecue, I mean, come on. What people, as Meathead said, we just want people to eat good. Come on, well, be nice. Maybe you're really skilled. Maybe you got a really nice offset and you know how to use it. And yeah, that takes skill. Okay, but don't be rough on somebody who doesn't have the time or interest is to delve into it as deeply as you have. They want it to be easy and they want it to be great. And why shouldn't they? And the manufacturers are responding to that, and they're coming up with good stuff.
Well, I mean, there's to an extreme. There are people, that's not really being a barbecue pitmaster. That's not really. Well, I mean, okay. So you cook your ribs. You go out in the backyard. You dig a trench. You lay green saplings across the top. You throw logs in the bottom, you light the logs, you wait for them to burn down to embers, and then you throw the raw meat on top, and you stand there all day basting it with a mop and turning it. Come on now, that's the original, that's real barbecue. That's, how slaves did it in the 17 and 1800s. All right, so you're cooking in a steel tube. Well, I mean, that's pretty advanced technology. You got a steel tube. Now, it may have a side firebox, and you're burning logs, and it requires maintenance, but I mean, the technology progresses. Yeah, you know what, Max? I think we're getting into pedantics and philosophy. You and I share a philosophy, as do most of the team on AmazingRibs.com. We want to teach people how to eat great and how to cook well, and we want to share with them what we see out there in the real world. Let's take some of these questions, because there's a lot of them scrolling by here. Let's see. Okay, starting with Brad Elmer. Saw a recipe for sous vide pastrami. Would it work similarly for brisket? Well, the best pastramis that I've cooked and that I've tasted, starting with Katz's Deli in Lower Manhattan, are made for brisket. Some of them are made from a cut called navel. It's kind of fatty and hard to deal with, and you never know what you got. But we have a recipe on our website called Close to Katz's Pastrami, and it's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
It may be the best recipe on the website. It may seem complicated or difficult, but it's not. Now, if you want to do it whole beef, not whole hog, all the way, you start with a piece of beef brisket, then you cure it and turn it into corned beef, then you rub it and you smoke it, and you can either sous vide it or steam it, and yada yada yada. It's a whole rigmarole, but you come away with an unbelievable pastrami. But there's a shortcut. You can go out and buy yourself really good corned beef. Don't buy the El Cheapo corned beef. Buy a really nice piece of corned beef. Use the rub recipe that I have on the website, because I've reverse engineered what they do at Katz's Deli. And smoke it and just slice it and eat it. If you want to make it more tender, you can do a little steam job on it. You can do a sous vide job, but it's really easy to do if you start with corned beef, and it's just bloody awesome. So do try it. Al Whitehurst. Max, he wants to know if you need any assistance.
Oh, I probably do, but yeah, I mean, as a matter of fact, I have recruited some of our staff. As Meathead said, Husky, who runs our Pitmaster Club, is testing this new Masterbuilt, and that's because I had to test the new Weber Smokefire, among other things. And I think we're all kind of tired of talking about it, but we could if somebody wants to. Yes. There's so many products out there. I can't keep up with them all. I appreciate your interest, but
Dennis Hamilton's asking, what is your take on the Oklahoma Joe Highland reverse flow offset? Are you familiar with that unit?
Somewhat. Oklahoma Joe's coming on pretty strong. They got some cool stuff. The way I look at that, and I haven't tested it yet, I have seen it. They're basically try to offer. We dislike cheap offset smokers. I had a very bad experience with one of these $150 jobs from Home Depot. I always say that people look at it, as I did, as a starter smoker, but it can dangerously be an ender smoker because they're so hard to operate. And even though you might get some decent results, I just can't recommend those cheap offsets. The good ones start to get, even at the low end, up around $1,000 or at least several hundred. Oklahoma Joe's kind of in between. They're just a little heavier duty, a little better designed than those cheap pieces of junk. And it's good enough, I would say, where if you're considering getting into the stick burning game, which means a wood burning, log burning offset smoker, which again does take skill no matter what you buy. That's not a bad way. If your budget's limited, you can get them for, I forget, like $350, something like that. And they're just a little bit better. They could be viewed as a starter offset.
Jim Phillips has an Oklahoma Joe smoker, and he's about to smoke his first brisket on Saturday. First brisket of the year. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Didn't mean to set you back to a novice level there, Jim. First brisket du jour of the year. He's smearing it with yellow mustard, then putting on a rub. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I mean, you want the rub to stick to the meat. The thing about yellow mustard is that, you know, we're talking about your classic ballpark mustard or even your Dijon mustard. It's mustard powder or the seeds of the mustard plant ground up into usually vinegar or white wine with some water, and it's a very thin mustard flavor. It's not as thick or intense. Think about the little Chinese mustard you get, you know, in Chinese restaurants, or the packets of Chinese mustard and Chinese carrot. That's much more intense. What you're using the mustard for really is just glue. It's not going to contribute much flavor. If you really want flavor, you'll get it from the compounds of the rub. So if you want a mustard flavor, use your powdered mustard, but beware, it's strong, it's sharp, and it's pungent. The use of mustard, believe me, if I took 2 briskets, rubbed one with mustard and then put the rub on top, and rubbed one with water and then put the rub on top, cooked them up and served them to you, you'd never tell the difference. By the time you cook it, the mustard flavor is lost and dissipated. You go right ahead and use it if you want, but it's really not necessary and a little more expensive than it needs to be. Okay, let's see. Tommy Wilson's asking if that gravity feed's similar to the stumps. Yeah, that much I know. The stumps also has a gravity feed.
Well, in the sense that it's gravity feed, and I hope I explained what that means, is they have a hopper, which is a vertical enclosure off to the side of the actual cook box. And you fill it with charcoal, and at the bottom is where the charcoal burns. And gravity keeps the charcoal just keeps going down towards where it's ignited at the firebox at the bottom. Stumps has been around a long time, and so it's the basic design is similar. Yes, obviously Stumps doesn't have the automation, and it does not. I don't believe they make any models that are going to get as hot as that Masterbuilt to do some high temperature grilling.
So we have a question here. Do you get the smoke flavor? Charcoal is for heat. Wood is for smoke. It's really important that you remember that. Charcoal can produce smoke, but when it's fully engaged, when it's coated with white ash, it doesn't produce much smoke. Think of charcoal as a heat source. And in that sense, it's very little different from gas. What you want for flavor is wood. Wood is where you get your remarkable, romantic, seductive smoke flavors. So
you're getting me excited here, Mead.
Oh, Christ. And all your top pitmasters will tell you this. Now, when the other big difference is that charcoal gets a lot hotter than most gas. So, I mean, for a steak, when you want a great sear, charcoal will give it to you better than most gas grills will. Now, some gas grills have a way of creating a sear burner that can really give you a good sear. I've got one, but that's a whole nother topic. I think too much is made of the differences between gas and charcoal flavor-wise. It's really the difference is the heat. And when you think about it, all of you folks out there who are charcoal devotees, all of your great steakhouses, 98% of them cook your steak over gas. They just have really hot broilers. All of the great modern barbecue joints use either Southern Prides or Old Hickories, which are gas-fired, but they use wood for flavor. Now, not all of them. There's a variety.
Yeah, I was going to say we want to make sure we make, but most of them do.
Yeah,
and
but most of them do. So
they want consistency of what they're serving. I'd like to follow up on what you're talking about, how wood is the flavor. With gravity feeds, the common way you get that you used wood is really not to put it in. Some people say I mix the wood chunks in with my charcoal and the charcoal hopper. I've talked to guys who know, including Myron Mixon. They say, no, don't do that. It could jam things up. It could cause uneven flow from the gravity in the hopper. Most the ones I've seen, they have a little area underneath the red hot embers at the bottom of the hopper where you put wood chunks, and the red hot embers drop down on them and slowly ignite them so the smoke comes into the smoke box, and that gives you that delicious wood smoke.
Clever technology. Max, any idea what it's going to cost? Charlie Jones is asking.
The master build? Oh, good. About $500.
Well, that's not outlandish, really.
Yeah, not really. I mean, we had a discussion about and I've seen them. I've got my hands on them, and I'm impressed. I spoke with the guy who designed it. It's not, as we say, built like a tank, but it's not a piece of tin can junk either. So,
I'm not gonna. I've kind of alluded to this, but I'm going to do it again. We see this every month when I do this. We see it on our website. Pellet grills are for newbies. Just set it and forget it. Not grilling to me. Grilling over charcoal and wood while controlling the heat is my choice. Good for you. Good for you. And I hope you ride a bicycle and don't drive a car with a gas and God forbid you have an automatic transmission. Come on.
I mean, to each their own. That's okay if you like to do it, but don't pontificate to others who don't care to do it.
It becomes like religion, you know? It's like vegans. Charcoal and wood smokers are like vegans. Yeah, I'm going to insult you. I'm calling you out. They're running around like the vegan. Oh, I don't eat meat. Well, I cook only on wood and charcoal. Come on. I mean, let's let people do what they want to do if they have fun and it makes good food. These pellet smokers are wonderful. Yeah, I burn. All right, let's cut to the chase. The very best barbecue I've ever had always is cooked over logs. Mm-hmm. Log cooking. I mean, I have a Kurubaku, which I stole from Max. Kurubaku is just an amazing device. It cooks with logs, and you got to sit there by its goddamn side and feed it logs because you can't just walk away. And the outcome is brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I attest to that.
Yeah, but I mean, you can make really good stuff with pellet smokers. Stop being pedantic.
Well, and also that's an exciting thing about that master-built charcoal gravity feed, thermostatically controlled. It's a pellet smoker that burns charcoal for folks like them that say, oh, it just doesn't taste strong enough for me, which I don't agree with, but that's my taste. It tastes different than charcoal or wood, but it tastes pretty good to me. Mm-hmm. At any rate, if somebody who has tried a pellet smoker and felt that way, that's okay. That's your taste. If you want more stronger flavor, maybe you better take a look at that master built. That's
a factor. Pellet smokers produce a very mild smoke, and some people don't find it strong enough. In fact, the whole state of Texas says pellet smoke is just wussy, and I can understand that. I mean, it's a string quartet. If you want a brass band, a pellet smoker's not for you. JM, Big Red Truck. What's the best tip for cooking baby backs in St. Louis at the same time? Good question, JM. The ribs section starts at the spine and wraps around almost to the middle of the chest. Baby backs are the curved rib bones attached to the spine, and they're about 5 inches long, and they're curved like a hockey stick. And they have, depending on how they're butchered, they can have a fairly thick slab of meat on top of the bones. And they usually, if you're cooking at 225, which is a good number that we recommend, they're usually taking 3 to 4 hours, maybe 5 hours at the most, depending on how thick the meat is. St. Louis cut, which comes further down the side, I like to call them center cut. The bones are flatter and straighter, and they're underneath the what is called pork belly, but it's really side pork. That's where your bacon comes from. There's not a lot of meat on top of these bones. The meat is between these bones. And even though the meat is not as thick as it is on baby backs, they can take a little longer, in general 5 to 6 hours. So if you're cooking both baby backs and St. Louis cut at the same time, how do you do it? It's easy. Start the baby backs an hour after the St. Louis cut. Start the St. Louis cut, wait a half hour to an hour, throw the baby backs on. How do you know when they're done? You can test with a temperature. We're huge fans of thermometers. I mean, cooking is all about temperature control. We strongly recommend thermometers. We have an electrical engineer who does what Max does. He tests thermometers for us, 200 thermometer ratings and reviews. But it's really hard to get a good reading on a slab of ribs because the meat is so thin. So we use a test called the bend test. And basically you pick up the slab in the middle with a pair of tongs and you kind of bounce them. And if the surface cracks, it's usually pretty close to done. Okay?
That's a small crack too, by the way. You don't want them breaking in half or you've overdone it.
Okay, let's see. Brian Schwab on the subject of pastrami. Bought a full packer. I want to do smoked point and pastrami flat. Okay, so he's separating. Okay, yeah. When you're dealing with general philosophy here, cooking a whole animal is always trickier and more difficult than cooking parts. Thickness is a really important factor in determining how long it takes to cook. So a turkey breast will cook a lot faster than a turkey thigh. But turkey breasts are best at about 155 to 160, whereas turkey thigh is about best at 165, 170, 175. So you put a whole turkey on and you're stuck making a compromise. Do a whole hog. The loin meat, which lies along the backbone right under the baby backs, is best at 140 to 145 at the most. The tenderloin 135 to 140. The shoulders need to go all the way up over 200 to gelatinize the connective tissue. So you're making a compromise when you do a whole hog. So you have the same problem with a brisket. There's two muscles in a brisket. And brisket is the breast meat. It's the pectoral muscles, the chest muscles of the steer. Steers don't have collarbones. So all of the weight of that big, massive animal, 500-600 pounds or more, is carried on that pectoral muscles. They're really tough, a lot of connective tissue, but they really respond to low and slow, long cooking. But there's two muscles. There's one called the flat and one called the point. And they're pretty much almost at right angles to each other. And the point is heavily marbled. The flat is not. And I have really evolved. I always cooked them together. That was the purest method. And I was a purist. But I've come to the point where I finally decided separate these two muscles. Cook them separately because they need separate treatment. They need to be cooked differently for different amounts of time. So, same thing if you're doing pastrami or brisket. I really like the idea of separating those two muscles and cooking them separately and getting them right that way. Okay. If money was no object, this one's for you, Max. Dan Mancuso.
I heard it coming. All right.
If money was no object, yeah, that's a comment. If money was no object, asked Dan Mancuso, what pellet smoker do you recommend?
That questions like that are very hard for me to answer.
Answer it, Max.
I really don't feel comfortable. Plus, there's just so many options out there, and the way I answer that to most people, especially if people come to the website and they make comments, I respond to any comment that's directed to me, and as well as, of course, our Pitmaster Club members. But the way I like to start that out is try to narrow it down. I don't. Maybe you like a certain color. I mean, there's intangible things there.
No, not color, Max.
Person. It happens. It really does.
This guy doesn't care about color. Dan doesn't care about color.
Well, then the question is, what do you care about? What do you care?
There you go.
You need to do a little research. Give me three. And then we can talk, okay?
Well, all right.
I don't want to just...
Capacity. How big is it? I mean, I have a Mac 2-star and I absolutely adore it. It doesn't have all the latest bells and whistles, but it's got this huge big dome. So I can stack like 4 turkeys in there, no problem. So if you're doing a big crowd for Thanksgiving, that's your machine.
Okay, but what if somebody says, well, I never do that.
There you go.
I want something that... But I want something with
how many
with Wi-Fi.
pellet smokers do you think we have in our database?
150, 200.
Get out.
Oh, yeah, I would say so.
So what you need to do, Dan, is go to AmazingRibs.com, click on Ratings and Reviews, click on Grills and Smokers, and then from the filter on a desktop computer, it's on your left. On a smartphone, it's at the bottom of the page. Click on pellet smokers. The results will come up in order of Max's ranking, the highest rankings at the first. Scroll down, look at them. Now you can narrow your search with price. You can put in a price. You can put in, or you can select whatever. You can play with the search filters and look at the features. Some of them have probes, built-in probes that you can stick in the meat. Some of them don't. Do you care about that or not? So look at the filters, look at the features, and narrow it down to 3, 4, 5 or so, and then ask a question at the bottom of a page. Ask Max. He watches these.
I see it every 7 days a week.
So Max, I've got it down to the Yoder and the Mac 2-star. This is what I really think is important. What do you think? He'll answer.
Yeah, and I might ask you a few more questions and try to get to the bottom of it, because here again, my finding, Meathead, is that if someone will engage with me in a conversation like that at our website, after that we bounce it back and forth a couple times, it's like I start to read the tea leaves and I see what they want. It's really it's not what I want, it's what you want, and that's why we work so hard to give you all these options.
But you'll get a personal answer from Max.
Yeah, absolutely.
Greg Whitehead asks, is there a reason to use mayo instead of mustard or water when applying a rub? Does the fat make a difference? It really depends on what kind of thing you're talking about. For example, I just did a bunch of... I'm experimenting with how to get faux fried chicken that tastes like it's been deep fried but hasn't, because not everybody wants to get a whole bucket of fat going, and so I've been playing with it, and I just did a batch where I rubbed it with mayonnaise, which is mostly fat, and it did pretty well. But in the case of something like ribs or brisket or pulled pork, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter what's under the rub. The rub is what matters. Okay. Using butcher paper to wrap. I see where you do it for brisket. Would you ever want to do it for pork butt? That's a really good question, says Albert Haller. Butcher paper or aluminum foil? I'm an aluminum foil guy. Aaron Franklin at Franklin's Barbecue, the best brisket guy on earth, uses butcher paper. I don't see that there's a huge difference. I've played with them side by side. For me, I am willing to make compromises based on convenience and price. If I'm competing, where there's a $10,000 check at the end, I'll go to extra efforts and stuff. But if I'm just cooking for myself or friends and family, a 5% difference in quality is not going to be noticed. So I just use aluminum foil. It's really easy to work with. And one of the keys is you want a really good seal. There's no need to really do it for a pork butt, though. Pork butts can take a beating. I like to recommend brisket, butt, ribs, 225, good number. I always wrap brisket. It's called the Texas crutch. I'm not going to go into great details about how and why. You can find that on AmazingRibs.com. Just search for Texas crutch. But pork butt, you can beat it with a hammer and it just doesn't care. It can take a beating and keep on take a licking and keep on ticking. Okay. Brian Schwab on the subject of pastrami about a papyrus. Yeah, again, I'm not going to get deeply into this, but I do like the idea of separating point and flat. And one of the reasons is there's this huge vein of fat between the two of them. And that fat is just really goopy. I know a really good brisket cooker. That would be the folks over at
Smoke.
Smoke, thank you, Max. Smoke, S-M-O-Q-U-E. You read my mind. Barry at Smoke. He actually digs out a lot of the fat in there. But, I'm at the point now where I'm a separator. Brian Garner loves his Yoder. Yeah, they are fine machines. Greg McCoy.
Heavy duty. Yeah.
Greg McCoy, tell us about barrel cookers. Max, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Upright barrels. That's another one that's gaining. I assume you mean the upright barrels.
Yeah, that's a good question. All right, let me just define some terms here. When we talk about barrel cookers, we're talking about cookers that look like an oil barrel. They're 55 gallons, 35 gallons. Some people talk about offset cookers, which is the correct name. They're a tube that is laying on its side.
A horizontal.
A horizontal tube. And some people call them barrel cookers. That's the wrong term. So I'm guessing you're using the term correctly, and you're talking about barrel cookers. These look like an oil barrel, and they stand upright. And there's a bunch of them on the market, and they're really inexpensive, and they're really good. And I hope I haven't stolen your thunder, Max.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, they're becoming more popular, and some of them are a little more expensive. But one of the things that's interesting with those is they lend themselves to, they naturally settle in at a bit higher temperature, and it's more around to upper 200s, 300 degrees, but they work great. They produce great smoked meat, and they cook faster than most of the other designs. As you said, we recommend you go for 225. But these things, they excel at hot and fast smoking. And they're becoming more and more popular on the competition circuit and in residential settings as well. The first one that I got my hands on was the now popular pit barrel cooker. They're all over the place now, and they're selling for about $350, I think now. The price went up recently. There's a lot happening with pit barrel. We talked about Oklahoma Joe earlier, and I mentioned they're kind of on the move. They have an upright that's really loaded with all kinds of great features. It's in the same price range as the pit barrel, around $350. And then you get into the higher cost ones like Hunsaker and Gateway and others that are more getting around $1,000, and you can do all kinds of fun stuff. As I mentioned, they're popular with the competition teams. A lot of those higher-end manufacturers will do custom paint jobs and put your logo and stuff on it as well. But they're great. I love them.
Okay. Max, you can't hear it, But our new toy here, I have the ability to put applause in the background.
Oh, I thought that was
And a little triangle ding.
like that.
Glockenspiel. Somebody come and carry me away. I've got a new toy here. Jeremy Kunkel. Anyone looking for Berkshire? Go above the butcher, as Meathead mentioned. The butcher is hard to find. And search for farms in your area. I've literally met the pig that I'll be buying soon. Cut out the middleman, and it's actually easier to find. That's a really interesting topic. I don't know where you're located, Jeremy, because it certainly is going to vary across the country. You live in Iowa, you can get anything you want as fresh as you want. You live in New York City, or Chicago, it's going to be a little different. But the problem we're facing now, I'm an old fart. I'm going to be 71 in June. I was raised with butchers, and in fact, I learned so much about meat from a neighborhood butcher who was real good, and he'd let me come in and hang out behind the counter. He had an aging locker, and he just taught me so much. And then he died, and then I found another butcher, but they're all dying off, the old-fashioned butchers. The cool thing is there's this new generation of young butchers that are really into it. I don't know if you saw the TV show on butchers, Butcher Competition, but there's this whole generation of talented young butchers. Unfortunately, they are artisans, not butchers. And I don't mean to demean it, but they are truly devoted to quality, and they seek out the best animals, the best meat, the best farms. They butcher with care, not with speed, and often they're expensive. But if you can find a good butcher like this, I think they're more important to me than my stockbroker. They have helped me find good meat, and I walk in there, and I go in there, and I'm looking for pork chops. And I walk in, and even in my neighborhood grocery store, where they have meat cutters rather than butchers, I go into my neighborhood grocery store, and the head butcher happens to be female. She sees me coming, and she will also say, "Hey, come here, Meathead. We got in a shipment of beef primals today, beef rib primals, which is the big rib section that ribeyes come from, with the bones attached and everything." And she'll say, "And I got half a dozen, and 2 of them are just really heavily marbled. They're USDA choice, but I'm telling you, they're as good as prime. And we'll sell them to you at the same price as choice." I'll take it. I'll either buy the whole primal, or I'll buy some ribs, whatever. Get to know your butcher. I have benefited immensely from knowing my butcher, and a really good trick is grill up some brisket, or smoke up some brisket, or some ribs, or whatever, and show up around lunchtime. Your head butcher usually comes in really early, because that's when the delivery trucks arrive. So he or she is there to meet the delivery trucks, and he or she checks out around 4 o'clock or so. So show up around lunchtime with a couple of slabs of ribs. My neighborhood grocery store, they have a couple of picnic tables out back. And the butcher, they go out there in their white coats and blood-stained and everything, and they sit there at the table and they have bag lunch. I show up with a couple of slabs of ribs. "How you doing?" and just leave it and walk off. Head back into the store and buy my breakfast cereal, whatever I'm there shopping for. They remember me. And when I show up, they tell me what's just come in, what's good, what's not. They take care of me. Take care of your butcher, they take care of you. It's a great technique. Now, Jeremy, I've wandered from your topic of Berkshire. There are a variety of new, old hog species out there. Berkshire is among them. Berkshire is a hog species variety that has been around for years and years and years, and the meat is darker, and it's juicier, and it's wonderful, and it's actually becoming more and more available. Another one is Compart. You can find Red Wattle. There's just a number of these interesting heritage hogs, beef varieties, turkey varieties, and you can find them at specialty butchers, or you can ask your butcher. That's another thing. People come to me and say, well, I want to do brisket, but my butcher doesn't carry it. Of course he doesn't carry it. Nobody in your neighborhood cooks brisket but you. So what you've got to do is you got to go in, ring the bell, ask for the butcher. The butcher will come out and say, what can I do for you? You say, I'd like to order a USDA prime brisket, about 16 pounds. And he'll order it for you. May come in at 18 pounds. They may not be able to control the USDA prime. You may get a choice. You tell them what they want. They can order it from you. They have a wholesaler and a slaughterhouse that connected to the wholesaler. They can get you what you want. You might have to go in on Monday and place an order and get delivery on Thursday or Friday, but you'll have it for the weekend. So plan ahead, get to know your butcher. And if you want to play with Berkshire pork, ask for Berkshire. It's not too hard to find nowadays. You'll pay extra for it, but it's really nice animal and really flavorful. And if you want to go for Mangalista, which is like the coolest, hottest, Mangalista it's called, ask for it. They may not be able to get it right away, might have to special order it, but you may be able to get it. Maybe not. You know, a lot of it has to do with where you're located and who your butcher deals with. Okay. Jean-Marc says, spray with duck fat before rub. Will this add another layer of flavor? No. Not on a big slab of meat that you're going to cook for 12, 16. It's just going to melt off. I mean, think about this. You're dealing in parts per million in flavor compounds. You're going to put onions and lemons in the water pan underneath. It just isn't going to influence. The meat itself is the main source of flavor. If you want flavor, put a rub on it. That's a really intense, concentrated flavor source. That's paprika. That's garlic. That's salt. That's onion powder. That's intense. A thin layer of oil is just not going to add any flavor at all to a slab of meat. Now, if you're talking about a piece of chicken or a steak that you're going to cook quickly or something, it might have a minor difference. But think about flavor in terms of big. I mean, duck fat is just not going to make a difference when you start to cook. It's going to drip off, melt off. You're just not going to taste it. It's not going to make a difference. Now, frying. If you want to fry some chicken in duck fat, now you're talking. Forgive me, I'm reading these questions here. Canon Taylor says having a good butcher is better than a good proctologist. Yeah, that's probably
interesting.
I don't know. Maybe they're related. Jean-Marc asks, thank you, Jean-Marc. I'm 71. Yes, he hopes I live past 100. A succession plan to ensure. Yeah, we have a succession plan. It's in writing, and everybody on my team and my wife knows about it. Amazing Ribs will live well beyond me, I hope. We're coming up on the 1 hour mark here. Usually we go an hour and a half until we run out of questions. And I've hit the bottom of the question list. Oh, here we go. Does dry brining work on shrimp or other seafood? Oh, that's an interesting question. All right, let me just talk about dry brining. I think everybody's heard of brining. Brining in general is just adding salt. Now, let's just talk about salt for a second, because salt is the magic rock. Salt is really important in all kinds of cooking. You watch the cooking channel and they always say, well, you didn't season enough. They're talking about salt. Salt is remarkable in that it amplifies flavor without altering it. Add garlic, it alters the flavor. Add onion, it alters the flavor. Salt doesn't alter the flavor. It just turns up the dial to 11. It just amplifies the flavor. It does several other things. It seeps deep into the meat, and it alters the protein so that the protein holds on to moisture. Nothing else gets in as deep as salt. Salt is just two molecules, sodium and chloride. Two little atoms. One molecule, two atoms, NaCl, sodium chloride. And when they get wet, they get electrically charged. And they can move deep into the meat. Sugar is 23 molecules and up. Atoms rather. 23 atoms and up. It's this massive molecule. It can't penetrate. It can get into little cracks and pores and crevices and maybe a 1/16 of an eighth of an inch down. But salt can go all the way to the center. It takes time. It's a slow process, but salt can go all the way to the center. So brining is a really good idea, putting salt on the meat. And there's two ways to brine. One way is to take the meat and soak it in a vat of salt water. And you generally, there's some solution recipes. The problem with that is you need a big vat and you got to keep it refrigerated, otherwise it'll spoil and go bad. But dry brining is the alternative, and I believe I'm the guy who invented the term dry brining, but it's just a matter of sprinkling salt onto your meat or your vegetables well in advance. And the moisture comes up, melts the salt, ionizes it, and it moves deep inside. And over a period of time, it takes maybe roughly an hour to go about a half an inch. So if you've got a big thick turkey breast, overnight is a good idea. If you got a 1-inch steak, an hour is all you need. But you sprinkle it with salt, half a teaspoon of Morton's kosher salt per pound of meat is my rule of thumb recipe. Now I specify Morton's kosher salt because that is what we use in all our recipes, not because Morton's has paid us or anything. It's just that I want to standardize because Morton's kosher salt, the grain size is pretty consistent, and it's about double the size of Morton's table salt. And it's about double the size of crystal kosher salt. So when the grain of salt is really important because when the grain size is larger, it has a different salinity. Think of like a cup of salt, Morton's kosher salt versus a cup of table salt. The salinity in the table salt is much higher because it's a smaller grain and there's less air between them. Think of a bucket of softballs versus a bucket of golf balls. The larger softballs have a lot more air in between them, so they will weigh less. Now, weighing salt is absolutely the same, so that a pound of kosher salt equals exactly the same salinity as a pound of table salt. But table salt, you need half as much as you need Morton's kosher salt because of the size of the grains. So we standardize on kosher salt. So we dry brine, and dry brining has a very similar effect to submerging in a tank of water and salt. And the salt seeps down in there and does its magic, and it's a great thing to do. It really helps amplify flavor, retain moisture, and make things just generally taste better. And I know there are a lot of old farts like me that are worried about salt, eating too much salt, and our cardiologists warn us about it. But it's not a lot. Half a teaspoon per pound of meat is not a lot. It's far less than you'll get from a bag of McDonald's French fries. It's just a very small amount. Okay. Mark Demers says, like to see a video of Max cooking on the units he tests, or maybe a staff cookout. If you go to youtube.com/AmazingRibs, Max does a video of every grill he tests. He doesn't do a video of him cooking on them, because that would be kind of boring, sleepy. But he shows you, he takes you on a video tour of every grill he tests. I mean, out of the box, lifts the lid, lifts the grates, pulls it apart. There's dozens of them on youtube.com, Amazing Ribs. You will see Max. And then if you click, there's a link that will take you to his detailed review of cooking. And he has photographs of cooking, detailed data, detailed information. John Rogers.
I should interject. If you want to see cooking, Meathead, you have a lot of great videos about cooking and preparation. And
yeah, I do have some good videos on that same video channel of me. I'm the cook. Although Max is is a fine cook, but I have a lot of good cooking videos. John Rogers, my Mac 2-star has been catching fire deep into the cook. Hits the screen. I have a Mac 2-star. It's the only pellet smoker I have, and I do a lot of my recipe development on it. I love pellet smokers for recipe development because when I set the temperature, it gives me that temperature. That way, when I write a recipe and I say for a 5-pound pork butt, cook it at 225 for X number of hours, I know that works, rather than do it over charcoal or wood and guess, because the temperature is fluctuating all over the place and yada yada. So I use a pellet smoker for all my recipe development, and I use a Mac 2-star, and I absolutely love it. Now I have a new model in the garage that I haven't unpacked yet, but I've never had a grease fire on mine. Hits the grease drawer.
Well, the obvious question is, and I don't mean to insult the man, but are you cleaning it properly? I mean,
that's the question. He's asking that question. Yeah, you gotta. That's the problem with the pellet smokers. You know, we sing the praises of the pellet smokers, but they are a pain in the ass to clean. Because there's this big flat metal plate that all the grease drips down on, and it builds up char and carbon and grease and everything, and you got to get rid of it. I have a $50 steamer that I bought on Amazon. It's about the size of a football with a hose. You pour water in it, and it makes steam. And I use that for deep cleaning my grills. Really a good tool. I use that on my my pellet smoker. Recommend it. Yeah, you've got to clean your grills. Grease.
If there was no grease there'd be no fire.
Yeah, so. Really. Fair point. I mean, that was at the core of the issue over the Weber. You can't have a grease fire without grease. Okay, Tom McLean, reverse sear versus regular sear. All right, this is a really fun question. We have been proponents of reverse sear for thick cuts for years. Here's the idea. It's all physics. If you've got a thick steak, let's say 1.5 inches or 2 inches, and you throw it over a hot grill, the hot grill cooks the exterior really quickly, browns it, eventually burns it, and that heat builds up in the exterior. And that heat has to work its way down to the center slowly, because meat is about 70% water. And it takes time for the heat to move through all that water and hit the center. So an inch, let's say we've got a gas grill or a charcoal grill that's knocking along at 500-600 degrees, and you throw the steak on there, it can take 15-20 minutes for it to get up to medium rare in the center or more. the problem is when you cut into it, you have a really beautiful dark crust, and right below that you have a brown layer, then you have a tan layer, then you have a pink layer, and in the center, about a third of the steak is perfectly medium rare. So, the alternative is to take the steak and put it on a grill that's been set up in two zones. You got one side that is rip snorting hot. The other side, there's no heat. So if we're talking about a gas grill, you've got one or two burners on one side and no burners on the other side. If it's a charcoal grill, all the charcoal's pushed to one side, no charcoal on the other side. Now you start the meat on the indirect side where there is no charcoal or gas underneath the meat. So it sits there, and now it's gently warming, roasting with convection airflow. And it takes a lot longer. It could take an hour. But what happens is the heat penetrates slowly so that if you cut it open, it's almost perfectly even color from edge to edge. So the entire interior is the right temperature, the temperature you're looking for. The problem is the surface now is kind of bland and gray. So you start cooking a thick piece of meat, like a thick steak or a turkey breast or even a chicken breast, on the indirect side, away from the flame, lid down, roast it gently with some wood over the flame so it bathes the meat in smoke. Then you lift the lid, you move the meat directly over the infrared radiant heat. This is radiation. This is like being out in the sun, only it's infrared instead of ultraviolet. But it is a radiant heat instead of convection heat on the other side. And that radiant heat pounds the surface, and it browns it rapidly. So you've got to flip it every minute or two. Flip, 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 flip. And what happens is as it browns the surface, it darkens it and you build a crust. And you get that beautiful flavor that comes from the chemical reaction of protein and heat and amino acids and reducing sugars subjected to that powerful energy of infrared radiation. And you flip it, and instead of that heat pushing down into the center of the meat, because the lid is up, much of that heat bleeds off into the atmosphere. So you've really just treated the surface. And then you flip again. And you keep doing it until you get the surface the color you want. You watch the interior temperature, because some of the heat will penetrate, but not much. And when it hits the perfect ideal temp, 130 to 135, which is classic medium rare, you're done. And you slice into this baby, and you have this beautiful dark crust on both sides, and it's perfect medium rare in the center, edge to edge, bumper to bumper. And that's the concept behind Reverse Sear. And it really works on things that are maybe an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches thick. If you're down to a 3/4 inch steak, you go into the grocery store, and that's all they have on display is 3/4 inch ribeyes. Then you take that baby out and you sear the snot out of it over a high temp with the lid open. So as you flip, the heat bleeds off, and when you're done, you'll get a great exterior and a great interior. You'll have some of that rainbow effect, but it won't be so bad. So Reverse Sear is a brilliant technique for thick cuts of meat. And I've done, on the website, I show you pictures of a prime rib. Big old rib roast, maybe 5 inches thick. Fantastic. Edge to edge, the same color. Perfectly medium rare. Absolutely gorgeous. It's the same concept the sous vide uses. In sous vide, you cook it at, say, 130 degrees. The interior goes up to 130 and stays there. So it's exactly the same temp on all sides. And then you take it out, and it's butt ugly. Now you sear it on the grill or in a pan, and you get the exterior. So you're cooking the interior and the exterior separately. And you cook the interior first. You don't want to sear it first. A lot of cookbooks tell you sear first. But when you do that, you're putting massive amounts of energy, calories, not the kind of calories we're talking about for eating, but this is how you measure energy. You're putting energy into the surface of the meat, and it works its way to the center, and you get that rainbow effect. So it's just the opposite of what a lot of cookbooks say. Okay. Paul Jouillard. Is it common to inject brisket or any other thick cut partway through the cook instead of before putting it on? No, it's not common, but it's not a halfway bad idea. I've done that with turkeys. I've played with moisture. Comes in 3 different forms. Moisture comes from water, it comes from melting fat, and it comes from connective tissue dissolving into gelatin. And when it comes to turkey, particularly turkey breast, you're dealing with a very lean piece of meat. Pork loin, same thing. Really loin piece of meat. There's almost no fat in it. And it's so easy to overcook them. So, what do you inject? Well, you can inject it with water or salt water or some sort of brine or chicken stock, which is flavored salt water. And I've played with all those. And what I wanted to do with turkey is I wanted to butterball them. That was where they got the name. I wanted to inject it with butter. But the problem is when you inject a cold turkey with a syringe full of butter, the minute it hits the cold turkey, the butter solidifies, clogs up the injector, doesn't spread out. You want it to spread out. So I've had good luck with injecting a turkey breast halfway through the cook when the meat is warm with butter. Now, I haven't tried it with a brisket. Now, I don't know anybody that does. But one of the ideas for injecting, and what a lot of the competition cooks do, is they inject with special brisket injections, which are formulated both with salt and other compounds that are really good at retaining moisture. And they all inject brisket because brisket is just the orneriest, toughest, nastiest, ugliest piece of meat there is. And if you can defeat it, you are a pitmaster. So most competition cooks and many restaurants and many backyard cooks inject brisket. I do. I give brisket all the special treatment it asks for. And injection is one of them. I typically inject just with a beef broth that is salted, not unsalted beef broth. But there's a product called Butcher's Blend, which we recommend, which is made by a butcher in Oklahoma who is also a competition cook, and he's very good. He wins a lot of competitions. That is really well formulated for brisket. And you just Google Butcher's Blend, and you should be able to find it. If you can't, I'll send you a link. And, Jean-Marc Demar is like anticipating. There is, in fact, phosphate in this compound. And I'm not going to get into the chemistry, but phosphate's really good at holding on to moisture. Dave Guarilla asks, what's my favorite grill to smoke a brisket or a pork butt with? You know, I'll come to Max in a minute and hear him, but for me, my all-time favorite is the Carubicue. I absolutely adore cooking with logs. The flavor is so wonderful. A lang, which is a horizontal offset with logs. But I don't often go to that trouble because I get lazy sometimes. The Carubicue is spectacular flavor, but you just have to sit there. You sit there I can't sit there for 12 hours, And I'm a reader. I mean, I read books, so I can sit there and read. I just, I don't have the patience for it. I'll do my ribs on it, but I just don't want, I don't know. I love my Karubikyu. It's fantastic for brisket, ribs, pork butt, all of it. Particularly brisket and ribs.
And that aroma, so I call it Karubuke.
Yeah. All right, Max, you answer this question.
Your favorite grill, though, for smoke? I mean, any charcoal. I thought you were going to say Hasty Bake. Charcoal grills.
Oh, I forgot about my Hasty Bake.
Yeah. I mean, even a Weber kettle, you can smoke on. If you're talking about grills, the big thing I would say is sometimes you disagree with me, Meathead, but I just don't like smoking on a gas grill. A gas smoker, that's different. But even just a run-of-the-mill Weber kettle, you can do some smoking on it. You got to know what you're doing, but you got, you're going to use wood chunks and stuff. But a Hasty Bake, most good charcoal grills can as long as they're a good charcoal grill where you can control the heat, where they're tight construction, tight lid, tight intake and exhaust air dampers, so you can control what you're doing. You can do some serious smoking on a good charcoal.
Let's mention our friends over at Slow and Sear.
Yes.
Dave Parrish over at Slow and Sear invented this absolutely must-have insert for Weber kettle. All right, let's just start with the Weber kettle. All kneel and bow to the Weber kettle. I mean, this thing's been around since, 49?
52.
52, sorry.
Yeah.
I've been around since 49.
What did you do for those first few years?
Really, I didn't have anything to cook on. 1952. The modifications have been minor. The core concepts are there. One of the core concepts is it's a fairly tight seal on the lid so that you have pretty good control of air. And now the nitpickers will correct me when I say there's two fuel sources, charcoal and air. They'll say air is not a fuel, but it is essential. And so controlling the air is important. And the Weber kettle does a fine job. Well, this guy Parrish invented this insert that goes into the Weber kettle. It's around about $100, and you can buy a stripped down kettle for $100. For another $100, you put this insert in it, and it basically turns it into a first-rate smoker, and it really improves its searing ability. I'm not going to go into the great details. Go to our website and look up Slow and Sear and read all about this cool tool, and order yourself one if you've got a Weber kettle. It's not a high capacity smoker, but I've done fantastic smoking on my Weber kettle with a Slow and Sear. Nice machine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a couple more questions. We're coming up on an hour and a half, and I've been drinking wine, and you know what that means. No, I'm not drunk. I got to go to the bathroom.
It happens.
Ed Vega, based on your article on salt penetration, has nothing to do with osmotic pressure, but in molecule size, or did I got it wrong? I'm not quite sure I understand your question, but osmosis has nothing to do with salt. There's an illustration on the website. It's osmosis. It's one of these many myths. Osmosis would pull all the moisture out. It's the salt going in. Go to the website and look up osmosis, and you'll find the article on how salt works, and it has nothing to do with osmosis. Oh, here's a good question. Anthony Barbison. For wood pellets, does it matter whether the pellets are 100% flavor wood or if they're oak based, such as 60 to 70% oak, and the rest flavor wood? the fuels article on the website doesn't seem to draw a conclusion on this. Yeah, all right. I've done this little spiel before in these, but you can't overstate it. The most important thing about quality when you're cooking is the quality of the meat. Get good meat. If you can, fresh is a little better than frozen, but frozen is just fine. Then the rub, not the stuff you put underneath the rub. It has almost no effect. The rub is important. It contributes a lot of flavor. Then temperature control. Don't let the temperature get out of control. Manage your temperature, and then smoke. And the wood you choose has very little to do with the outcome. A lot of people obsess with, well, when I cook brisket, I use cherry wood. For my ribs, I use maple. There's a big difference between shagbark hickory and pignut hickory. There's a big difference between hickory grown in Arkansas and hickory grown in New York. There's a big difference between hickory that is kiln dried and air dried. There's a big difference between hickory with a lot of bark and hickory with no bark. There's a big difference between hickory with 30% moisture remaining and hickory with 10% moisture remaining. So if I tell you hickory is the right meat, I'm full of it. Now, the right wood. Now, with that said, let's also say hickory in general is a strong flavored wood. So, and so is mesquite. Hickory and mesquite are very strong, regardless whether it's pignut or shagbark, whether it's Arkansas or New York, bark or no bark, kiln dried or not. But the other thing is this stuff is not appellation contrôlée. When Home Depot picks up the phone and calls the guy that sells them bags of wood and says, "We're running low on hickory. We need another 5,000 bags." Okay, and he says, "Harry, how much hickory we got out there?" "Oh, we could probably do about 3,000 bags." "Well, better throw some oak in there." You don't know for sure that bag that says hickory is really all hickory, or if it's any hickory at all. Don't obsess over it. If you can, get a single source for wood and just stick with it for a year. So if you got to, get a source of wood, you like it, go out and buy 20 bags of it and just stick it in the garage or the basement and just cook with that and get everything else under control. Get all your other variables. Get a good source of meat. Get a good rub. Get control of your temperature. Get everything under control, and don't worry about the wood as a variable. Once you've got all that other stuff under control, now you can start switching up woods and experimenting. But remember, a test means one variable, not two. You can't decide, I'm going to run a test, and I've been cooking at 225, but today I'm going to cook at 250. And I've been cooking with cherry, but today I'm going to cook with maple. That's not a test. You got to only vary one. So experiment with them and find out. But I think you'll find, and particularly when it comes to pellets are almost all blended with oak because it has to do with the manufacturing process and the feed process, the way the device feeds the stuff. There are a few pellet manufacturers that make 100% pure varietal wood. Most of them are a blend of the varietal labeled wood and oak, and some of them have actually just oak with a oil extract from the labeled wood. So it's complicated. Get an experiment with one. I use a Mac 2-star for almost all recipe development because I'm just a control freak. I absolutely have to have precision temperature control when I'm working on a recipe for you. I want to be able to tell you that it takes X number of hours to cook this or X number of minutes to cook it. And so for smoking, I use a pellet smoker, my Mac 2-star. and I use primarily apple. And I use it from Barbecuer's Delight. They're a really good supplier. Candy Weaver is the president of KCBS right now. I like her product, and I don't want too many variables. So I standardize on the apple pellets from Barbecuer's Delight, and I standardize on temperatures. Almost everything I smoke is either 225 or 325. And that's because I know that when I tell you to do that, you can learn to control whatever smoker you have for one of those two temperatures. 225 for almost everything, 325 for poultry. You need the higher temperature to render fat. So 225 for almost 95% of what you're smoking. And now you've got control. Okay. Coming down the home stretch here. Can you dry brine for too long? I don't think so, says Eric Elgin. The concern here is if you salted something and you put it in the fridge, after a while it's going to start to oxidize. So you don't want to leave it in there for like 6 days. It's going to start turning brown and oxidizing. So salt it up overnight, 24 hours. I wouldn't go beyond 24. Neftali Ortiz. Started grinding meat for burgers. I started using Chuck. A good start. Want to try mixing other cuts? Yeah, fun. 20% fat on your ground meat. Do you measure the amount of fat? Okay, grinding meat. All right, we start from 10,000 feet here. Hamburgers, patties, sausages, they're all cousins. They're ground meats with flavor. So a sausage in a casing is really a cousin of a hamburger. It's just a ground meat. The variables are, what's the ratio of meat or muscle to fat, and what kind of flavorings you've added. And do you have a casing on it, or is it just a patty? But basically, a salmon patty is the first cousin of a hamburger, or is the first cousin of Italian sausage. They're all cousins. So, in general, ground meats are moister and have more flavor when there's more fat. Now, you have to cook ground meats to a minimum of 155 degrees. I went to Soldier Field for a football game last year, and I was just thrilled out of my mind when I went up to the concession stand, and there was a little cart, and the kid was doing Polish sausages, which we do in Chicago better than anywhere. Mm-hmm. I had Polies in D.C. at the Army-Navy game, and they were just disgusting. But the Polish, and the kid had a thermometer, and he was temping his Polish sausages. I wanted to kiss him. When you grind meat, start with this. You get the animals, and they're driven to the feedlot, and now they're all standing around. They're not practicing social distancing. They're shoulder to shoulder, and it hasn't rained in a month, and the ground is dry, and the poop is dry, and it's dusty, and it gets on their hide, and then they're brought into the slaughterhouse. They're killed rapidly and painlessly. They're hung upside down. They're drained of blood. The guy has a really sharp knife. He slits them down from the belly to the throat. Out spill the guts. Oops, he maybe have cut into the intestines a little of the stuff that's in the intestines gets on the surface. He cuts off they pull off the hide, they chop it up, and they puts on a table. But there's potential for contamination. Stuff that's on the hide, stuff that's in the gut, stuff that's in the knife. If there's contamination, it's on the surface. Bacteria are like sugar. They're too big to get deep inside. So when you've got a ribeye steak, there's a very high likelihood there's bacteria on the surface. I don't mean to gross you out. But they all die rapidly when they hit about 165 degrees, instantly. Well, you're going to grill a steak. You throw it on the grill, you're going to kill anything on that surface rapidly, instantly. And it's not going to penetrate into the interior, so the interior is safe, even at 130 degrees, which is medium rare. No problem. Now you take that steak and you grind it up before you cook it. Anything that's on the surface gets down into the center. You can't cook it to 130, 135. You've got to get it up to 155, maybe 160, to make sure it's pasteurized and that it's safe. So ground meats, all ground meats, must be cooked to a minimum of 155. Chicken should be 160, 165. The way to make it moist, you don't have to cook a burger medium rare to be moist. Just add more fat. Remember, 3 sources of moisture: water, fat, and melting connective tissue or gelatin. So just add more fat. The classic blend is 80-20. That's your classic hamburger blend, your classic sausage blend. But if it's too dry for you, or you're just nervous about a medium rare burger, and you should be, then add more fat. Now, I know you're saying to yourself, oh, my cardiologist and my wife and my family are going to kill me. Look it. If you live to be 80, which is, I think, roughly the average life expectancy nowadays, you're going to eat 80,000 meals. 3 meals a day times 365 days a year, roughly 1,000 meals a year, 80 years, 80,000 meals. How many of those are going to be 30% fat hamburger? 3 a month, 4 a month. It's not going to kill you. If you really love burgers, if you really love sausage, and you don't overdo it, you don't eat them every day, throw in a little extra fat. Okay. Coming to the end. You forgot to answer my question. Does dry brining work on shrimp and seafood? Oh, yeah.
Oops.
Keith Clemens. I'm sorry, Keith. Oh, geez. I got rolling on dry brining, and I forgot to answer his question, which was, does it work on shrimp and seafood? Yeah, but not so much, because they have a higher salt content to begin with. Freshwater fish, maybe not. But saltwater fish have more salt in their meat. Look at the bodily fluids of all animals, including you, are salty. Your blood is salty, your saliva is salty, your boogers are salty, your urine is salty, your semen is salty. All your bodily fluids are salty. Same thing for all animals. They're only more salty for saltwater animals. And so there is a good deal of salt in them. I don't think it's really necessary to brine. I do salt fish. In fact, we just had a fish dinner tonight, and I said, a little more salt. Needs a little more salt. So, fish and shrimp cook so fast that you're not fighting the problem of it drying out. So I don't really bother too much. I think if I'm doing fish, and also they're skinny, so you don't have to salt them overnight. Typically when I'm doing fish or shrimp, I open the bag and I just, clean them up and I hit them with a batch of salt, and then I get on with whatever process I'm doing. Greg Grolemon, my Mac 1-star runs 20 degrees cooler at the grate than indicated on the controller. Yes, it's clean. Temp measured on a ThermoWorks Smoked X2. Well, when you say yes, it's clean, I mentioned earlier, you need to make sure that probe is clean. Carbon buildup will affect things. The probes on most of these pellet smokers are way in the back. And they're starting to work with ways to get the probes to read more throughout, and or algorithms to measure. I think this, I've got an oven that I can adjust, and we know it runs, it's off by 10 degrees. You may just have to make the mental adjustment. I don't know how to deal with that. You might ask them.
Mm-hmm.
God, what's the guy's name at Mac?
Matt.
Huh?
Matt Tucker?
Yeah, the Tucker guys.
Well, Bruce is gone now, if you're thinking of him.
Yeah, no, there's another. I'm trying to think of the other guy. Reach out to them. They're in Oregon. These things are built in Oregon, made in America. They're really great at customers. Reach out to them. Ask them. See if they can answer your question. They may have an adjustment. Thank you, Clint Podelsky, for the kind words. And for expanding them. Neftali, do I use a flat top grill, and what's your favorite thing to make on them? I don't have a griddle. This is the hottest thing now. You go to Home Depot, and for $200 you can buy a big flat top carbon steel griddle, just like they have at the neighborhood cafe. They call it Joe's Bar and Grill, and they don't have a grill. They just have a flat top. And basically it's a giant frying pan. It's a plancha or a griddle. And you can buy one now, and they're pretty cool. We got a guy, Paul Sidoriak, who's written a book on them, and he writes for us. They're really cool. I don't have one. I do have a Lodge cast iron griddle, flat surface with a rim, so I can pour oil on it. And I use it a lot for fish. I will take a cast iron griddle, pour in a thin layer of oil, get it right over a direct heat on my gas grill, get it rip snorting hot, put the fish flesh side down while it's still flexible, and get it golden, and it doesn't take long. Then flip it over and sear the skin till it's crispy. Now, in restaurants, what they will typically do is they'll sear the fish on both sides in a frying pan, but there's no dome on it. It's open air. So then they pop it in the oven. And that's really a typical procedure for restaurants. But in a grill, if you do it the same way, you sear it on both sides with the lid down, it's roasting and frying at the same time. And if you do it right, which I often do, it comes out absolutely perfect. About 130, 135 degrees center, tender, juicy, flaky, and you get a golden crust on one side and crispy skin on the other. Really nice. I do that a lot. And of course, you can do pancakes, eggs, and stuff on a camp trip or something like that. Yeah, griddling is fun. Ben Colino asks, any charcoal sales this year? Almost every year in May. I don't know when it starts. Kingsford has this massive sale. Everything, all the Kingsford charcoal. Just watch for a big sale on Kingsford in May. Hold out as long as you can until they announce it. I know guys who go out and buy a whole skid full of it. 100 bags. Cannon Taylor uses his barbecue as delight, same as me. Tim Hausler asks, does it matter what temp you store charcoal? No, I don't think so. But humidity does. Charcoal, activated charcoal charcoal sucks up moisture. So you want to keep the bag sealed. I've been playing with the Weber brand charcoal lately. It's pure charcoal, no binders, and it comes in a plastic bag. So it's fairly airtight, and I like that. Just avoid humidity. It can get really wet, but once you light it on fire, it drives off all humidity, so it's not that big a deal. Brian Schwab is commenting on my dog Reese. Where's Reese? I got two of them, Brian, Reese and Ivy. Reese is my golden retriever, and she just wanders in and out. Ivy sometimes sits at my feet. We're dog people. We have trained 5 leader dogs for the blind. 5 of them out there dragging blind people around. All right, well, I think we should wrap this on up. I just want to do a quick little commercial if you'll stick with me. I want to mention that we have postponed our meetup in Memphis, which was scheduled for August. You can't, too complicated for me to explain. You see, there's this virus. Oh, never mind. So we won't have a meetup in Memphis in August. We've pushed it back till next summer. It's going to be a lot of fun. It was sold out already, but I'm sure some people will cancel. Go to AmazingRibs.com/Memphis. Take a look at the schedule. It's going to be a really good time. Join the party. Go check out our videos. Max posts a lot of videos. I've got some cooking videos. Check out the Pitmaster Club. Go to AmazingRibs.com. Click on the link, Pitmaster Club. Take a 30-day free trial. Doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to subscribe. We don't pester you. We don't hit begging you, oh, please join. When the 30 days are up, we'll ask you to consider paying $24 a year, $2 a month. It's really a cool place, and there's a lot of cool benefits. You get 2 magazines for free, a lot of other cool stuff. And if nothing else, just sign up for our email newsletter, Smoke Signals. Max, you have a farewell.
Oh, it was a lot of fun, Meathead. Thanks for inviting me this evening, and hope that we answered the questions adequately for everybody, and thank everybody who's participated and joined us this evening.
Yeah, this is fun. I'm glad this is the first time we've done one with you present. First time I've used this new software, Ecamm. Several of you have commented the video quality is better and the audio quality is good. And the ability to have a guest speaker. I can have multiple. Once I learn how to do it better. I'm also playing with Zoom. I think Zoom can do this. We'll keep on experimenting. We'll have some more guests on. And Dan Mancuso is going to sing us out with The Pitmaster Club is Awesome. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate your kind words. Good night, everybody. And have fun cooking, and please keep yourselves and your loved ones safe. We'll get through this, and when we come out on the other side, we'll all be better cooks. Salute.